Hello everyone and welcome to the 2016 Hellmann's 500 at Talladega Superspeedway race review, where I recap what went on before the race, during the race, and after the race, looking ahead to the upcoming race. And I have a lot to talk about in this race review, but I will first start out, as usual, giving my overall thoughts on the race. So, it was actually one of the more calmer Talladega races in quite some time. Certainly, it almost felt like a complete 180 from the spring race back in May, which was just a wacky Talladega race. Had a lot of attrition. This race, it had many long green flag runs, and most notably, there was not the big one, the large multi-car wreck that many of us come to expect every time we come to a restricted play track. There was no big one at all, and that and when it doesn't happen, it's definitely a little surprising, but also, at least for me, it's actually kind of refreshing because I usually get sick of how these play races turn into demolition derbies, and so to see a calmer race that I didn't have a whole bunch of big wrecks and more racing, it was nice. And the winner of the race, Joe Logano, his win was not surprising. Logano, I think, has become one of the better restricted play racers over the past couple of years. He won Talladega 1 year ago, and wins it again. This is only Logano's second win of the year. His first one was back in the Michigan June race. And Logano, who frankly hasn't been in contention for a while, wins this year. So I was actually starting to think over the past several races that Logano might only get one win, but Logano got the win, and this is good momentum. He is one of the 8 drivers that's moving on to the next round. And now let's move on to other topics. If you follow NASCAR closely and go on news sites like JSki, you probably noticed that there was quite a bit of pre-race news. First of all, I guess the first one that I wrote down was back on this past Monday or Sunday night, whenever the entry list was released, there were 42 entries. That was the most since the Daytona 500, which had 44. But then it went down to 41 when the team that Josh Wise drives for, or the 30 car, they decided to withdraw. Ryan Reed was the extra driver on the entry list, driving the 99, a 4 Roush car, to make a Spring Series debut. He made the show. Dave Gillen, the other extra entry, he didn't make the show. He was too slow based on his qualifying time. Now let's get into charter news. Tommy Baldwin Racing sells its charter to Circle Sport Levine Family Racing. I don't know if this happened now or if it will finalize in the off season. And there's also rumors that next year Casey Mears will go to the 95 car. Ty Dillon will go into the 13. Michael McDowell will be the odd man left out. And next week in Martinsville, Greg Alding will attempt, or he will make a Spring Series debut. It depends on how many entries there are in Martinsville, in the 30 car. He's 18 years old, and if he does make the show, he will become the youngest Spring Series driver to ever compete at Martinsville. Greg Alding, some would say that he's a developmental driver, an up-and-coming driver, but really he hasn't really been that very impressive in the lower series. No Truck Series wins, very few Xfinity Series starts. I think he's only made like two Xfinity Series starts, and it was in Roush equipment, and he didn't really exactly. He wasn't really impressive. And the Truck Series last year, I remember him driving for Calvish Motorsports. He wasn't that impressive either. So I think this is likely a case of money talks. And next year, Greg Biffle might leave Roush Family Racing, and JTD Racing will open up a second team for him next year. And this isn't exactly very surprising. I mean, I think like a week or two ago, Biffle talked about how if he cannot perform well with Roush, then he'll move on to something else, which in other words basically means that he will try to find a more competitive ride. And I have a feeling that these reports will come true. And JTG is not like a huge step up, but it is a step up from Roush, because this season, with AJ Allmendinger, he's performed better than all three of the Roush cars. He's higher in points than those three cars. Also, it's supported by RCR, and RCR I would say is better than Roush. In pre-qualifying inspection, NASCAR confiscated the front jack screws, or maybe it was the front jack bolt, on Martin Truex Jr.'s car in pre-qualifying inspection. And so this is like the third or fourth time that the 78A team has failed some kind of inspection in less than 2 months. And Vice President of Competition Scott Miller, I think that is his role, said that what was wrong it wasn't a competitive advantage, and it wasn't, I guess, a significant safety infraction. So points and penalties will be unlikely, and penalties will be announced on Tuesday or Wednesday. And I gotta say, I don't know if Cole Pern and the rest of the 78 team are making mistakes, or if they are trying to explore gray areas and are getting caught for it. But this is getting ridiculous, and it's making and the more it keeps happening, the more harder it is for me to like this team. Chasers Matt Kenseth, Carl Edwards, and Kyle Busch rode around in the back for the entire race. I don't think any one of those three was higher than 25th outside of green flag pit stops. And this is a strategy. It's not a new strategy. We've seen it many times before over the past several years. Drivers choose to ride around in the back for a portion of the race to have a good chance of missing the huge wreck, the big one. And we didn't have the big one, but they were still able to finish well enough to make the next round. And what is controversial about this is this question: was it a violation of the 100% rule? In my opinion, I don't actually. I guess I'm not exactly sure what to think. Now, what is the 100% rule? Well, to basically describe it, it's basically NASCAR wants, under the rules, you have to give it your 100% best effort to get the best finish you can. That's basically what the 100% rule is. And while they certainly did not do that, I felt like that they gave it 100% in their strategy. And why did they do the strategy? Well, not just to miss the big wreck, but the thing is, these two drivers and their crew chiefs and the rest of their teams, they were all thinking big picture. They want to go out and win a championship. You know, that's their big goal. You know, their big goal is to not win every single race possible. It is to win a championship. And the way this format is, this chase format, really what's been proven over the past 2 years and so far this year is that you really cannot have a mistake. You have to be mistake free, or if you make a mistake, you better hope they're able to recover from it. And these two drivers entered the chase with I guess you could say a comfortable points margin, but then again at Talladega, with this race being an elimination race, frankly no one's safe on points. But even but they did have that cushion, and so because they had all three of these drivers finished well in the past 2 races at Charlotte and Kansas in this round, so they certainly had the right, and they were able to pull off the strategy. So I guess it's really up to you whether you think it's a violation of the 100% rule. I don't think any one of these three will be penalized, and I don't think any one of these three should be penalized. I will say this though, it was definitely disappointing, even though I'm not like huge fans of any of these two drivers. I'm pretty neutral towards them. It was disappointing to see them race like this, because we want drivers to race hard and race aggressively, but you can't really blame them for doing what they did. one storyline that I know many fans are going to be talking about leading up to Martinsville was the incident very late in the race and after the race between Kevin Harvick and Kurt Busch. So this was with 2 laps to go here, and I don't think anything happened here, but if it does work, it will show that that 1 lap later, coming to the checkered flag, Kevin Harvick and Kurt Busch made a little contact right there. But that didn't look anything intentional. But then this right here, Kurt Busch comes down on Kevin Harvick. They rub fenders, and right here, Kevin Harvick basically goes after Kurt Busch. Possibly it looked like that he was trying to punch him. And if he did try punching him, he did come very close to achieving that. And these two are teammates. So what exactly happened? Well, Kevin Harvick, he was mad at Kurt Busch. I think he said in one of his interviews that Kurt Busch cleaned out the right side of his car on a cool down lap. I don't exactly agree with that. I think Kurt Busch was just trying to give Kevin Harvick a congratulatory bump. Both of them are now moving on to the next round. Harvick was already in the next round because he won at Kansas the week before. Kurt Busch was able to point his way in. And I think Kurt Busch was basically, I think trying to tell Kevin Harvick, great job, but by both of us. And both of these drivers did have fast cars as well, and I think even at points in the race we're actually working together. So I felt like Kevin Harvick just simply took it the wrong way again, and I felt like that I think it's one thing to go after your driver, but going after your teammate, that's taking things to a whole nother level. And I don't think Kevin Harvick really exactly needed to do that. But Kevin Harvick is going to be Kevin Harvick. These two will probably have a sit down, and Tony Stewart will likely talk to both drivers because Tony Stewart is the owner or co-owner of Stewart Haas Racing, the team that both of these drivers drive for. And thus this incident will probably be taken care of, and both drivers will put it behind them going to Martinsville, and that will be a good thing for both drivers because you certainly don't want to go into the next round of this chase and be in the middle, and be part of a heating rivalry. Joe Logano proved that very well last year. If you are a chase driver and it's an elimination race, you don't want to make any mistakes, and you also don't want to have any bad luck. And unfortunately for 2 of the strongest drivers this season, it happened to them. Bad luck, to be specific. And there were also both engine failures. Engine failures, I would classify that under bad luck. There's not a whole lot you can do to prevent engine failure, in my opinion. I think a lot of that is just is out of your control. And I don't know if both of these engine failures were exactly the same. I do know that in the case of Brad Keselowski, it was likely an overheating problem because a couple times in the race, Brad Keselowski, debris got stuck on his grill while leading, and he actually had to drop to the back. And with less than 50 laps to go, Brad Keselowski and Ryan Blaney, which Ryan Blaney is like a semi-teammate to him. Ryan Blaney passed him to get some or all of the debris off, but it was, I guess, too little too late because the engine expired. It went sour, and there was actually fire underneath the race car. And Brad Keselowski had a very strong car today. I think he had the best car, and he could have very well had won this race. He entered this race below the cutoff after a bad finish at Kansas. I think he finished like 38th or something like that. Martin Truex Jr., on the other hand, was actually 13 points above the cutoff line, which is not a comfortable cushion by any means at a track like Talladega, but it isn't cushion. He actually won the pole, but didn't exactly have a super strong car. And the engine failure just after a cycle of like pit stops is what took him out of contention. And both of these drivers did not make it into the next round. Both of these drivers have won 4 races each time, so not exactly, once again, a good example of the chase format rewarding winners, and and having both of the great seasons come to an end because of a couple of bad races is certainly not very satisfying, in my opinion. But unfortunately, but it's what has happened, and now both of the drivers can now just focus on the next four races. On the next four races, just going out for wins and ending their strong seasons in a good fashion. Late in the race, the battle for the final spot in the round of 8 was between Denny Hamlin and Austin Dillon. And in the final laps of the race, it changed positions. One lap, Austin Dillon was into the cutoff. The other lap, Denny Hamlin was into the cutoff. And just like we saw in the prior 2 years of Talladega being an elimination race, we didn't know who was going to take the last spot until the final seconds of the race. Once everyone crossed the start-finish line, Denny Hamlin won in a tiebreaker with Austin Dillon for the final spot. And the tiebreaker, in case you don't know how that works, whoever gets the best finish whoever gets the best finish out of the two in the round, not in the race, but out of the round, wins the tiebreaker. And Denny Hamlin not only finished better than Austin Dillon, but it was also he finished better in this race than Austin Dillon had in any of the 3 prior races. So that's how he won the tiebreaker. He won it by 6/1000 of a second because the Kurt Busch passes him. Because if Kurt Busch was the one who edged Denny Hamlin, then Hamlin would have missed it by 1 point, and Austin Dillon would lead it. So to me, this was the most unbelievable moment, and certainly I think, and if Hamlin wins the championship, then we'll certainly look back at this right here. Wow. When we come to the plate tracks, Daytona and Talladega, one thing that many fans look forward to is to see underdogs finish well or even win. And Brian Scott highlights the few underdogs that I would say that got really good finishes. Brian Scott finished a career best finish of 2nd, and he was actually into the top 5 and 10. I want to say throughout most of the race, but I'm not exactly quite sure. But I do remember seeing it up front a whole lot. And Brian Scott, who this season when we've seen him on camera, he's usually spun around, been in the wall, or some other problem going. This time something good happened to him, and it was really good. Career finish 2nd, put himself up there for a win. Denny Hamlin was the driver behind him on the final lap, and I felt like Hamlin was racing on defense, trying to hold his position. But I felt like that if Hamlin could have pushed Brian, if Hamlin was able to push Brian Scott possibly could have ended up in victory lane. Brian Scott tried to look underneath Logano going into turn 24 of Logano through the block, and from there on it was pretty much all over. But still a great finish for Brian Scott. It was actually a good day for both Richard Petty Motorsports cars. Eric Almirola finished 8th, and for both these drivers, these are their first top 10s of the year. And I think that to me, I think this was race 32 out of 36. I think that frankly shows how much Richard Petty Motorsports has struggled this year. And certainly there has been talk that big changes are going to come to the team in the offseason. And while it certainly has not been the season any drivers have wanted, this is a nice way to end off the season, with good finishes. As far as other drivers that finished well, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. another top 5 for him, and AJ Allmendinger another top 10. So back-to-back top 10s for AJ Allmendinger. Before I talk about the chase picture, I want to talk about Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s performance up in the NBC booth. It was announced this past Wednesday that he would be part of the booth for a portion of not only this race but also next week's race at Martinsville. And I gotta say, I liked him more than I thought I would. I was a little bit concerned that he was going to possibly be more of a distraction from this elimination race, but I actually enjoyed his insight. For example, he explained why it's so common for the leaders or the lead car to get debris on his grill, because when everyone is running single file on the high side, all of the trash and other debris actually fly towards the top lane, and that's something that I don't really think I've ever really heard from anyone about any NASCAR television booth before, and it was little things like that I really enjoyed out of him. You know, he sounded like a professional, and he hasn't done a lot of this in his entire career. I know that he was part of a Xfinity race at Michigan for Fox, and I think that's possibly the only time he's been up in the booth, but I might be wrong. But certainly I did like hearing Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s insight, and Martinsville, another track that he loves that has won there before. It'll be interesting to see what insight he brings to the table in that race. 4 drivers were eliminated after this race at Talladega: Martin Truex Jr., Brad Keselowski, Chase Elliott, and Austin Dillon. And now the 8 drivers remaining: Joe Logano, Jimmy Johnson, Kevin Harvick, Matt Kenseth, Carl Edwards, Denny Hamlin, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch. 4 Joe Gibbs Racing cars, 2 Stewart Haas cars, 1 Hendrick car, and 1 Penske car. And looking at the round of 8, we have Martinsville, Texas, and Phoenix. And who does well at each of these tracks? Well, Martinsville is a track where Johnson has won there 8 times, so he's historically been well there. Denny Hamlin has also been great there. He's won there 5 times. So those are the 2 drivers that I think will be factors for the win. Kyle Busch dominated the race back in April, led over 300 laps, and won at Martinsville for the first ever time. Matt Kenseth also had a really good car that day. Then we move over to Texas, a race that Kyle Busch won back in April, but Jimmy Johnson has won the last 4 fall races. So I'm feeling Johnson's likely going to be a contender for the win at Texas. As far as anyone else at Texas, well, Texas will probably, if there's one race out of the 3 that I think is going to be like a JGR love fest up front, then it'll probably be Texas, because the JGR program on the Mile High tracks has been excellent this season. And then once we get to Phoenix, everyone else move aside. It's going to be the Kevin Harvick show. Okay, that's exaggerated, but Harvick has truly been great at Phoenix. He's won there 8 times, 6 times on the current configuration, and also won there back in March in a photo finish, barely edging out Carl Edwards. So to me, it's really hard to see anyone else but Harvick dominate and winning at Phoenix. I would say he was in trouble, but really the way this chase format has been, it's really hard to predict who will do well. You know, there have been times where drivers that many thought weren't going to advance to the next round and advance anyway. For example, I thought Kurt Busch was going to be in serious trouble and not make it into the round 8 based off speed, but he was able to capitalize on others' misfortunes, and that's why he is here. So really, I don't really think it's really right to say who's going to do that, because frankly, anything can happen. It's NASCAR. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Be sure to rate, comment, subscribe, and bye.